afternoon and happy Nowruz. I'm Nadia Jani and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Middle East conflict escalates, raising fears of wider war and US ground involvement. EU asks for reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and no more strikes on energy or water sites. And Ukraine peace talks stall as Iran war shifts global focus, but new discussions could resume this weekend. A fast escalating conflict is raising new fears of a wider war in the Middle East. Iran is ramping up attacks. Israel says it has crippled Tehran's key military capabilities, and the US could be pulled deeper in despite limited public support at home. Here's more.
Iran stepped up attacks on Gulf energy facilities after Israel struck South Pars, its share of the world's largest gas field co-owned with Qatar, because about 80% of Iran's electricity depends on natural gas. The strike threatens its power supply. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that after 20 days of operations, Iran no longer has the ability to enrich uranium or produce ballistic missiles, adding that Israel is continuing efforts to fully dismantle those capabilities.
We are acting now, not only to destroy the ballistic missiles and the remaining nuclear programs, very little remains, but also to destroy the industries that enable the production of these programs. And already now, after 20 days, I can tell you, Iran today has no ability to enrich uranium, and it has no ability to produce ballistic missiles. We are continuing to dismantle these capabilities. We will crush them completely, down to dust.
At the end of the press conference, Benjamin Netanyahu denied dragging the U.S. into the conflict, saying no one can dictate to Donald Trump. Trump said the U.S. needs more funding for the war, with the White House seeking $200 billion to replenish depleted supplies. The Pentagon estimates the conflict cost $11.3 billion in its first week, as it nears its fourth week.
$200 billion, I think that number could move, obviously. It takes money to kill bad guys. So we're going back to Congress and our folks there to ensure that we're properly funded for what's been done, for what we may have to do in the future, ensure that our ammunition everything's refilled, and not just refilled, but above and beyond. I mean,
about 65% of Americans think Donald Trump will send troops into a large ground war in Iran, but only 7% support it, according to a Reuters/Ipsos poll released Thursday. The three-day poll showed Trump's approval rating at 40%, little changed from a previous survey after the February 28th attacks on Iran.
President Trump has used a meeting with Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi to underline divisions among allies over the Iran conflict. Speaking at the White House, Trump signaled out Tokyo for its support, while taking aim at NATO partners and defending its administration's military strategy in the region.
US President Donald Trump hosted Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi at the White House on Thursday, with talks dominated by the escalating conflict with Iran, alliance dynamics, and regional security. President Trump praised Tokyo's stance, singling out Japan as a key partner as tensions continue to disrupt global energy markets. He drew a sharp contrast with NATO allies, criticizing what he described as insufficient support, particularly in securing shipping routes through the Strait of Hormuz.
We've had tremendous support and relationship with Japan on everything, and I believe that based on statements that were given to us yesterday, the day before yesterday, having to do with Japan, they are really stepping up to the plate. Yes, unlike NATO.
The US president defended the ongoing military campaign against Iran, claiming significant degradation of Tehran's capabilities and suggesting the operation is nearing completion. He also defended the decision to launch strikes without informing allies, arguing that secrecy was essential to the operation.
We've obliterated their Navy. We've obliterated their just about everything there is to obliterate, including leadership. Their Navy's gone, their Air Force is gone, their anti-aircraft equipment is gone. We're flying wherever we want, Pete. We have nobody even shooting at us. When we go in, we went in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay? Right? You know, he's asking me, no, you believe in surprise, I think much more so than us. Well, I'll be going.
The meeting also touched on regional geopolitics, with Trump raising Japan's relationship with China. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi emphasized a measured approach, reaffirming Tokyo's commitment to dialogue.
Japan has been consistently open to dialogue with China, and also, second, we have been addressing our relations with China in a calm manner. And also, speaking of the US-China relationship, my sincere hope is that the relationship will be something conducive for our regional security and also ensuring the global supply chain in the world.
The meeting comes as oil prices surge and tensions in the Strait of Hormuz intensify, with Washington continuing to press allies for greater involvement while insisting it can act alone if necessary.
It's not easy.
Staying on this, the US is ramping up its military presence in the Middle East, deploying more Marines as the conflict with Iran escalates. Our Washington correspondent Ubay Shambanda has this.
Thousands of more Marines and sailors are being deployed to the Middle East as reinforcements for the ongoing war against Iran. Officials in Washington say that the Boxer Amphibious Ready Group and the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit are expected to sail to the Middle East as part of a surge of naval power in the region. On Thursday, President Trump told reporters that he currently has no plans to order the deployment of ground troops on Iranian territory, though he did say that he has not necessarily ruled out the option. The fighting has been steadily escalating since the United States and Israel first struck Iran 3 weeks ago as part of Operation Epic Fury to neutralize Iran's missile production and nuclear weapons program. U.S. military planners are deliberating whether American boots on the ground will be required as part of a takeover of the strategic Kharg Island in the Arabian Gulf. Iran exports most of its oil onto tankers that dock on that island. Last week, the Pentagon ordered over 2,000 Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit to deploy to the Middle East. This unit is specialized in amphibious assaults that are supported by sea and air power, which indicates, along with the other reinforcements, that the White House could give the order for all these units to enter Iranian territory if required. And 7 U.S. allies announced in a joint statement on Thursday that they are supporting what could be a coalition to reopen the Strait of Hormuz for commercial ships and oil tankers. However, the statement did not include any firm commitment to send naval warships or any other resources that would be required for such a vast undertaking. Ubay Shambanda, A News, Washington.
European Union leaders gathered in Brussels on Thursday for a meeting focused on the conflict in the Middle East, as well as securing a €90 billion loan to Ukraine to support its war with Russia. Here is Anita Sharma with more details.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, with leaders at the EU summit in Brussels facing mounting pressure on multiple fronts as divisions over Ukraine funding deepen and the Middle East crisis drives a new energy shock. EU leaders agreed that the Strait of Hormuz must be reopened amid global shipping disruptions that are pushing oil and gas prices sharply higher. However, they did not commit to any military role, resisting pressure from Washington to help secure the route. French President Emmanuel Macron said all minds must calm down regarding the Middle East conflict and that the fighting should stop at least for a few days to give negotiations a chance. As for Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, well, she reportedly warned that Iran's attacks on Qatar's gas fields were serious for gas-dependent Italy, prompting her to once again call for reforms to the EU's carbon pricing mechanism. On Ukraine, the summit adopted conclusions without Hungary and Slovakia. Prime Minister Viktor Orban continued to block the €90 billion loan, saying he would support Ukraine only when Hungary gets its oil back through Druzhba. European Council President Antonio Costa, according to EU officials, said that kind of behavior was not acceptable. And Dutch Prime Minister Rob Jetten agreed, saying more support for Ukraine must be delivered as quickly as possible. Meantime, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz reportedly complained to EU leaders that discussions about the Iran conflict deflected time and attention away from the summit's original plan to address ways to boost European competitiveness. During his closed-door speech, the German conservative apparently pushed to introduce a reference to an ambitious AI omnibus by July, a package to streamline EU legislation. Well, with the EU summit heading into dinner last night, one diplomat said it was unclear how the talks on the long-term budget and defense would work, and that, quote, it's a mess. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Staying on talks in Ukraine, the Kremlin says talks between Washington, Moscow and Kyiv to end the war in Ukraine are on a situational pause after the Iran conflict began, though Ukraine's president expects new discussions to take place this weekend. Diplomatic momentum on Ukraine has slowed as the Middle East crisis takes center stage. Moscow says the current situation has shifted focus away from negotiations, with attention now on rising tensions involving Iran. Despite that, Kyiv remains hopeful that dialogue can resume soon.
Decisions, strong and steady support matters. Pressure.
A Russian drone attack damaged two foreign-flagged commercial vessels in Ukraine's southern Odessa region, the regional governor said on Friday. Two civilian commercial ships under the flags of Palau and Barbados were moored and loaded with grains. Two people were wounded and administrative buildings were hit in the overnight attack. A joint statement by European countries, Japan and Canada, has called on Iran to halt its retaliatory actions in the Strait of Hormuz. The nations say they are ready to take steps to ensure the safe passage of vessels.
Some European leaders, along with Japan and Canada, have issued a joint statement on the Strait of Hormuz. European countries, including the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy and the Netherlands, condemned recent Iranian attacks on unarmed commercial vessels in the Gulf and called on Tehran to halt threats to the choke point. Traffic in the strait has seen a sharp reduction as the conflict in the Middle East has escalated. This comes as Iran launched retaliatory attacks on vessels it considers linked to its adversaries following a preemptive strike by the United States and Israel. US President Donald Trump had earlier called on NATO allies to join efforts to secure the waters. Although the initial response was marked by hesitation, the joint statement now outlines the country's readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the strait. The statement says Tehran is threatening international peace by disrupting global energy supply chains after disruption to traffic has caused instability in the energy sector, with oil prices fluctuating sharply. Meanwhile, the Secretary-General of the International Maritime Organization has called for a de-escalation of tensions in the Gulf region, particularly around the Strait of Hormuz. Secretary-General Arsenio Dominguez said at least 7 seafarers have been killed in recent attacks on commercial vessels in the strait, adding that around 20,000 seafarers remain stranded at sea, facing high risks and significant psychological stress. For the region's oil producers, including Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, the strait is indispensable, carrying the bulk of their crude exports. It is also a crucial artery for liquefied natural gas, with roughly 20 million barrels of oil passing through it each day, about a fifth of global consumption.
Members of the Mexican Army carried out operations during the Olamani exercise at Santa Lucia Air Force Base on Thursday. Authorities say the drill is part of the interagency coordination under the Cucalao-Can security plan for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, involving technical groups focused on disarmament, terrorism and international security. The exercise comes in the middle of recent waves of violence linked to drug cartels, with local authorities pledging strong security measures ahead of the World Cup. Iran has called on the International Federation of Association Football to relocate its World Cup 2026 matches from the US to Mexico, citing security concerns in the middle of Israel-US war on Iran, which is becoming 3 weeks old. Here's more.
The Iranian ambassador in Mexico City, Abulfaz Pasandide, has urged FIFA to reconsider the venue of Iran squad matches in the upcoming World Cup and to shift them to Mexico due to security concerns. According to local news media, Iran's envoy made the statement in an interview with the UNO TV, during which he said that concerns over player safety have become a key issue. Iran's national team is scheduled to play its matches in the United States. According to one news agency, the team's security gained attention after US President Donald Trump said in social media platforms that for their own safety, Iranian players should avoid traveling to the United States. Iran's national squad, ranked 20th in the FIFA standings, qualified for the upcoming World Cup as Asia's second team and will participate in the tournament for the 7th time. Pasandide stressed that without Iran's participation, the World Cup would no longer symbolize friendship and peace. He also welcomed remarks by Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum, who expressed her country's readiness to host Iran's matches. Last week, Iran's sports minister Ahmad Donyamali said Iran would not take part in the FIFA World Cup matches in the United States because of wartime conditions. However, his remarks were ruled out later, with Iranian sports officials, including the Football Federation authorities, reaffirming Tehran's decision to take part in the upcoming event. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, for A News.
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was heckled and booed on Friday during his visit to Australia's largest mosque for Eid al-Fitr prayers. The protesters voiced their anger over his position on Israel's offensive in Gaza. Albanese and Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke joined worshippers at Lakemba Mosque in Western Sydney to mark the end of the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan, but was interrupted by some angry worshippers that he was there, some shouting phrases including disgrace and shame. Albanese made a quick exit to avoid further crowds gathering at the mosque.
Ramadan is incomprehensible.
Staying on gatherings during this time of Ramadan, Muslim worshippers have gathered for the Eid al-Fitr prayers at the Grand Mosque in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, on Friday, marking the end of this year's Ramadan in the country. Saudi Arabia and other Gulf nations, including the UAE, Bahrain and Qatar, are marking the first day of the holiday on Friday, which countries such as Malaysia and Indonesia have announced that Eid al-Fitr will begin on Saturday. The differing dates stem from variations in moon sightings, which determine the conclusion of Ramadan, the Islamic month of fasting and spiritual reflection.
أفراح ترددها حناجر الكل
After the break, I'll be looking ahead to the EU summit, which has already begun in Brussels. To discuss this further, make sure you stay with me. Welcome back to A News. Now, the European Union leaders have gathered to try to curb rising gas and oil prices due to the war in the Middle East. Things have escalated and Israel has attacked Iranian gas facilities, resulting in retaliation from Tehran against energy infrastructure in neighboring countries. Joining me now to further discuss this is Eitan Chernoff, geopolitical and security expert from Tel Aviv in Israel. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
My first question on this is the EU leaders, they met for a second day on Thursday to focus on energy and rising oil prices. What realistically can be done? I know they've requested for Iran to stop attacking their neighbours, but what can be done in regards to the Strait of Hormuz?
So the reality is that no amount of polite requests from third-party countries are going to sway Iran's behavior right now. They are enacting a doomsday plan where they feel they have nothing to lose. And the goal is not for people to be asking Iran nicely to allow shipping through. Iran's goal is to have the region and the world begging America and Israel to stop the attack. So far, now 3+ weeks in, we're at 21 days. That still hasn't happened in any significant way. And we can expect Iran to continue to disregard polite requests from European nations. As for what can be done in the Straits of Hormuz, at the end of the day, Iran's navy is decimated, as US officials say. They still retain small fast boats, mining capabilities, and importantly, surface-to-ship missiles, which can be fired off of Iran's coast, which would make any military protective operations, although feasible, nonetheless still risky.
And in that, also, Israel is striking Iran pretty heavily, and Benjamin Netanyahu's recent press conference claims that Israel and the US are winning the war. Where do things currently stand? You also mentioned that Iran's military equipment is being decimated, whereas Iran says they have a number of capabilities and more weapons being launched at a number of different places. What is currently going on? Where do we stand in all of this?
Well, I think both sides' statements are true. Objectively speaking, in terms of raw data, the Israeli and American operation has decimated Iran's military capabilities. We see that in percentages of launches per day. We're down 85, 90% from the first few days of the conflict. That being said, Iran, until the last bit of this war, will likely retain some sort of offensive capability and will continue to deploy it on a daily basis. If we study the type of war being fought right now, it's not unique, although it's a state actor as opposed to a semi-state or non-state actor such as Hezbollah and Hamas. At the end of the day, even years of battle between Israel and those two entities, there's always a number of missiles and drones that they're still capable of firing. We can expect that to be all the more true with a state actor like Iran sitting over a huge swath of territory who's had decades to produce these weapons. So if Iran's definition of being in the fight is being able to still fire free projectiles, yes, they're very much still in the fight, and they probably will be until this comes to some sort of conclusion at some point.
And what do you think now? What can the EU do to detangle the mess Israel, the US and Iran have created, even after the war has ended, just because the impact is currently being felt globally, especially when it comes to energy crisis and its demands? What can the EU's position be in that?
So I think the reality is the European Union probably has very little sway in impact over this war and its aftermath. I think that GCC countries who are really the ones suffering the most here, it's not Europe, and you need to remember no GCC country attacked Iran, and yet they're all being bombarded by Iranian projectiles on a daily basis. So there's some of them, Qatar, UAE specifically, have excellent air defenses. Nonetheless, these are the people who are most affected, and I think Europe is going to also need to answer to them at the end of the day. Where is Europe coming to the aid of the GCC? Right now, we don't see that, and that's a frame that I don't think gets discussed.
Well, that's quite interesting then. Obviously, when things die down and you know, if there is a ceasefire, and hopefully the war does end, looking back and finding out who the key actors were and how things were positioned will definitely have some bearing on global international relations. Do you think there are cracks showing in regards to that? Obviously, the US has called upon a number of NATO countries to step in. NATO has pushed back, as well as a number of other Indo-Pacific countries. Where are things aligning in regards to this particular war in the Middle East?
Well, I think we're seeing through this war a trend which has been going on for a number of years globally, which is the fracturing of 20th century alliances, right? Even though many NATO countries feel highly threatened by the Russia-Ukraine war, there's no third-party European country that has come to the aid of Ukraine. For example, we have seen now tensions between two Trump administrations, between the United States and NATO, and sort of priorities and budgets. And when we look at the GCC, we no longer see a united GCC. We have Qatar running narrative warfare for the past decade against Saudi and the UAE. And we saw a recent sort of divergence even between the Saudis and the Emiratis in Yemen. Now, I think in terms of the GCC, this war is going to reunite everybody. But the trend of the fracture of 20th century alliances is probably a natural process that can't be fully avoided, and this war will likely accelerate. But if we look at America in the post 9/11 environment, when so many countries refuse to go into Iraq, and I'm not justifying or criticizing the American invasion, America feels that they are powerful enough to go it alone. And they're actually not alone. They have Israel on their side, the strongest military in the region. So I think that with help or without help, President Trump likely feels he can achieve what he wants. I think that he's a man of reprisals, and there will probably be economic consequences for those countries that refuse to assist the Americans. But I don't believe that that will force a massive directional shift in the way this war is going, whether or not European or Indo-Pacific powers choose to step in or not.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, and a number of points you've raised. I just want to turn the conversation to Israel, who is actually widening the war by attacking infrastructure that belongs to the Syrian government in response to attacks against the Druze civilians. What is going on there? Why does Israel feel the need to also focus on that particular area?
Sure. So I wouldn't categorize that as an expansion of the war. We are in a fractured, right? We were talking about fractures in alliances. We're also in a region of fractured conflict. The truth is that Israel has been conducting airstrikes in Syria for the greater part of a decade since the civil war started. And even with the fall of the Assad regime, those air attacks continued. Israel has a Druze population. They have a very, very high rate of service in the Israeli military. And the Israelis see the Druze brethren in the region as an extension of the state and an extension of the priorities of the state. Thus, regardless of who starts skirmishes in Syria, anytime Israel perceives Druze populations to be under threat, they will intervene militarily, as they have over the past year plus since the Assad regime has fallen.
What I also understand in regards to that there have been some spying being done by Iranian officials in that particular location and area. Do you know anything about that? What does that tell us about the current situation there?
Well, as we're talking about fractured conflict, there's also overlap. Nothing exists in a vacuum. I can't speak specifically to Iranian espionage in southern Syria. I do know that the current Syrian regime is very antagonistic towards Iran, very antagonistic towards Hezbollah, has a love-hate relationship with the Israeli state, if you could call it that. Some days Israel attacks the Syrian regime. Some days Israel provides intelligence to the new Syrian regime as well to keep it afloat. I don't know about the specifics of Iranian espionage, but Iranian espionage takes place within Israel. Today, Israeli news announced that a reservist in Israel's Air Defense Corps was arrested for spying for Iran. So there's tentacles of these conflicts sort of intermingling, but they also exist in isolation.
Right, okay, fine. So even within this whole kind of under the umbrella of the war, you also got these extra layers coming in from different places that, Israel and a number of other regional countries are facing. And then just turning over to the million-dollar question, I guess, what could possibly stop the war with Iran, especially now that Iran is doing a number of retaliations in regards to this Gulf nations, American military bases? What can be done, as well as America saying that it's going to increase its efforts in regards to what it's been doing so far? As you mentioned, it's going into the third, nearly fourth week of the conflict with Iran. What could bring this to a stop?
Well, I think we've entered into a war of attrition where it's going to be about who tires out first, ultimately. Will the United States and Israel, maybe their Gulf allies, sort of say, hey, we've done everything we can, let's walk away? Or does the Iranian regime feel that they've suffered enough? It's a bit hard to say what will happen first. There does also, there is a possibility that there will never be an admission by Iran that they've had enough, but they could potentially cease attacks. There's just as likely a possibility that Trump announces arbitrarily, we've achieved our military objectives, the rest is in the hands of the Iranian people now. Either of those are possible. I don't think they're happening in the next week or two. I do think we're entering into a protracted conflict of at least several more weeks, unless something very unexpected happens.
And just on,
I do want to add just one.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. Add your point. Sorry.
So I think that, to me, the most remarkable aspect of this war is the GCC countries, who, again, did not initiate this conflict, are non-belligerent actors, and have been under constant bombardment of thousands of projectiles, many of them for their first time in history. Their resolve, air defenses, and emergency preparedness are world-class, and that allows America and Israel to continue this war because these countries have clearly planned ahead for this doomsday scenario and are managing the situation with tremendous grace and forethought.
That's really interesting, because also it's the fact of how long can they continue to do that, as we mentioned, going to the third or fourth week. But I just want to quickly, if you can just, your reflections on the US, because there's been a lot of pullback and pushback in regards to Trump and what he's doing, especially domestically. There's a lot of people in the country that are against this war. And he also said before he came into his second term that, going to war...
The audio cut out.
Oh, hello, can you hear me? Can you still hear me, Mr. Charnoff?
The audio cut out, I couldn't hear you.
Okay, sorry, no problem. I'll just go back to what I was saying. The US has said that, President Donald Trump said that he did not want to interfere in foreign wars going on, especially in his second term. He's now entered into this. There's been a lot of backlash from home, from Republicans, from Democrats. Where does that lie? Does that put any pressure on the US to stop this?
Well, I think there's definitely some pressure. I'm not sure that President Trump is bothered by pressure from the Democrats. There is a portion of Republicans that are unhappy. Keep in mind that there was a vote 2 weeks ago in the U.S. in regard to the war, and the Republicans did stand by Trump in that vote. And ultimately, there was not a legislative capacity to clamp down on what Trump is trying to do. I'm not sure that the numbers there have changed. I think that President Trump has a history of walking a very fine line between the deployment of aggressive military capabilities in a precise manner while trying to de-risk entanglement. He did that in his first term when he took out the head of the IRCG, Soleimani. He did that most recently in Venezuela. And I think he still views this as a much larger scale version of the deployment of military power without entanglement. A month or two long operation does not mean entanglement. The question is, does he have an off-ramp in that, in a horizon of a month or two? I think that he'll have some leeway until then, but at some point he will start to face more pressure. That being said, I think President Donald Trump, for good or for bad, does the things he wants and does the things he feels he has to do, even in the face of tremendous pressure. I think he has a lot of precedent in doing so.
Well, thank you, Mr. Charnoff, for your insights and for your expertise in this particular topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, we're going to take a quick break. After, I'll take a look at the key stories shaping the region. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to A News. Now, staying on the war in the Middle East, across Central Asia, governments are closely monitoring developments with rising concern over energy markets, logistics and security. In Kyrgyzstan, authorities have convened a Security Council meeting and completed another phase of evacuations of their citizens from the region. Here's more.
A Security Council meeting has been held in Bishkek, chaired by President Sadr Japarov, as escalating tensions in the Middle East push regional security concerns higher on the agenda. Officials focused on national priorities, including food and energy security, and discussed additional measures to protect critical infrastructure. At the same time, Kyrgyzstan's foreign ministry says it has completed another phase of evacuations from the Middle East. The operation began after the situation worsened across several countries where around 22,000 Kyrgyz citizens were residing. Hundreds have since been evacuated on special flights, while thousands more have returned home independently. Regional analysts say the escalation is no longer just a localized conflict, but part of a broader geopolitical shift already affecting Central Asia. one of the most immediate impacts is energy. Around 20% of global oil trade passes through the Strait of Hormuz, and any disruption there drives prices higher. For Kyrgyzstan, that translates into rising fuel costs and more expensive goods. Logistics is another growing concern. Iran remains a key transit route for Central Asian countries seeking access to ports in the Persian Gulf. If the situation worsens, cargo flows may shift to alternative routes, including the Trans-Caspian corridor linking the region with Europe via the Caucasus and Turkey. In this context, experts note that major infrastructure projects such as the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan railway could gain new momentum as countries look to secure more stable and diversified trade routes. Fariza Kalimursina, Almaty, A News.
Turkey has urged Iran not to widen the conflict in the Middle East, warning against attacks on regional countries. Speaking in Doha, Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said Israel was the main driver of the war, but stressed Tehran carries a historic responsibility to avoid further escalation. Meanwhile, Qatar has rejected Iran's claim that its latest strikes targeted US-linked sites. The country's prime minister said the attack hit a Qatari gas facility, highlighting the strike was not limited to foreign interests.
While speaking with Iran, we are trying to ensure that the war does not spread. Iran itself is being attacked, but there is nothing that can justify it attacking countries in the region. This further deepens divisions, spreads the war, and intensifies the crisis. We continuously offer Iran our most sincere and friendly advice as a responsible state. The only agenda item was how to stop Iran's attacks against the region, and countries in the region that are directly and heavily exposed to these attacks held a meeting to seek advice from brotherly countries like us about the measures to be taken.
There are unfortunately continuous Iranian claims that the attacks are attacks on US assets or on US bases in Qatar and the region. We reject this claim, which cannot be accepted under any circumstance. The biggest proof of this is that the attack which happened yesterday was an attack on a Qatari natural gas facility, which is a source of income for the Qatari people, but not just for the Qatari people. What they did yesterday also impacted the millions of people who Qatar is helping. We reserve our full right to respond to this attack through all available legal means, and for these attacks there will be a cost according to international law.
China and the UK have been discussing the escalating situation amid growing concern over its wider global impact. Both sides stressed the importance of restraint and continued dialogue as well as de-escalation efforts. Our correspondent Manu Makhdoom has more.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper have held talks on the escalating situation in the Middle East as concerns grow over the conflict's global impact. During the exchange, Beijing warned that the crisis is spreading beyond the region, with potential consequences for global energy markets, trade routes, and financial stability. China reiterated its call for an immediate ceasefire, stressing that prolonged conflict would benefit no one and urging all parties to return to dialogue and negotiation. Beijing also emphasized the need for restraint and de-escalation, positioning itself as an advocate for diplomatic resolution amid rising tensions. The United Kingdom, meanwhile, showed its willingness to maintain close communication with China, highlighting the importance of coordination between major powers. Both sides, as permanent members of the UN Security Council, agreed on the need to work together to prevent further deterioration of the international security environment and support efforts toward a long-term political solution. Manu Makhdoom, A News, Beijing.
After the break, I'll be joined by a regional guest to discuss the latest in the Middle East and the wider impact it's having on the region. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to A News Now. Saudi Arabia hosted a consultative meeting of foreign ministers from Arab and Islamic countries in Riyadh on Wednesday. They called on Iran to immediately halt attacks on the regional states. The meeting also brought together the foreign ministers of Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkey and the United Arab Emirates to discuss ways to support regional security and stability. Joining me now to discuss the outcome of this consultative meeting and find its key learnings is political analyst Lamis Jadid. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
My first question in this is, will Iran heed the call from Arab foreign ministers who have asked it to stop sending out missiles to its current neighbours?
You mean with Iran? I did not hear the first lesson, and there is an echo, so it's a little bit
No problems.
difficult.
Sorry, can you hear me a bit clearly now?
Yeah, I do.
Brilliant. I'll just repeat what I said. So the Arab leaders have actually asked, Arab foreign ministers have asked Iran to stop sending out missiles and strikes to its neighbours. Do you think Iran will listen to their call for that?
I think now we are in a stage of this war that diplomacy, it had past diplomacy, and we are starting to escalate. And the escalation actually started when the hit came on the South Pass in Iran, and its main supply of gas for the whole country, and this also had affected the whole infrastructure of energy in Iran. I think this was a big escalation already, and Iran is in a stage of responding to this attack. And now to ask Iran to stop the war, I mean, I'm not sure Iran will respond to any of these claims, and I think some needs of talks could help. Always diplomacy is never late for diplomacy, but I think some other steps should be considered while we are conducting a war. For example, not targeting civilians, not going really for the oil infrastructure that could affect the whole world and not just Iran or the Gulf countries. We are speaking about big recessions. We are speaking about whole economies could collapse. The scenario is very dark, and now I don't know where things could take us, but Iran is going for its big war, a war that is being prepared for years and years, and they are facing it. So we are all watching, and we hope the best.
Well, the Arab foreign ministers released a statement condemning Iranian attacks targeting residential and civilian infrastructure. Is there a lot of pressure on Iran to stop, or this pressure that is obviously being had, is it a fair request for Iran considering it did not start these attacks?
Absolutely, it's a fair request for any country to ask to stop any aggression against its people, its citizens, its infrastructure. It's not fair. War is not fun, as could be said sometimes. So we are in a very serious situation. Civilians might be harmed, countries might be destroyed, and the Gulf countries, they found themselves in a very difficult situation. They were under an American protection, and then because of this reason, because they have been, I mean, Iran has been attacked from their countries as they reclaim, so they had the right to respond to these bases. Anyway, our information until today said that Iran always at the beginning, it really, the first stage of its attack was against not infrastructure, not against civilians, it was always against military bases. But then it blinded the radars, and then it went against the ports. We are here speaking about Hormuz Strait, and this is, I mean, it's 12% of the I mean, it's 30% of the world energy that passes there, and we are speaking about a crisis that might touch Gulf countries, basically, who also they export their oil and gas through the Hormuz. So they have now choices between either American protection, or it seems if Iran arrived to control the Hormuz, as they are trying to do now, under a permission of Iranian permission to export their products. So a very difficult situation, I think, for everybody, and no question that Arab countries have all the right to reclaim their right of defend themselves and stopping the aggression against them. But they need to participate also. They should not be a reason for an aggression on another country.
And earlier I spoke to a political analyst in regards to this whole discussion on the impact the war is having, and mentioned Gulf states that are able to intercept a number of drones being sent over into their sovereign areas. How long do you think they're able to basically protect themselves in regards to widening attacks from Iran that say that they're only focusing on certain, bases, not civilian areas, but just able to focus in on the ports and their infrastructure? Do you think these Gulf states can withhold another week or two or months if this continues?
We are facing non-symmetrical war. It means we cannot compare the power on both sides. Iran is going for drones, sometimes cheap drones, and drones are changing the game in so many wars now. We watched in Ukraine what happened. It's cheaply made, does not cost much, and it could cause lots of damage. But I think the blind spot here, it's the radars also. Radars have been hit. It was the second stage of this war also. So it makes it difficult for all the American bases there in the Gulf, or even in Israel itself, to alert before the attack. They have some kind of 1 minute only to react. And I think this might make it more difficult for the Gulf countries, especially that Iran has many cards still to play. Iran has the third production of filterizer in the world, and if it stops it might take the whole world into some kind of a recession after. Iran could hit the desalination bases in the Gulf, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait. It's 90% of the water in Kuwait comes from such installations. So I think serious issue could come out if this war does not stop now. We hear about some kind of invasion, and I don't think it will be very feasible for the time being, but it seems it's willing. America is willing to do it for the whole world, for the sake of the whole world now, if they could not really control the Hormuz Strait. And if this crisis, economy and security issues in the Gulf, and of course energy crisis, if it does not stop soon, it seems they want to accelerate and not to go to any negotiation point or diplomacy.
And just
this will touch everybody.
Sorry, Lemis, I didn't want to cut you off there. I just wanted to quickly, before we don't have a lot of time, just to move slightly over to another point in regards to Lebanon, which has been having a number of serious attacks from Israel. How are they best positioned in all of this? Obviously, Israel is targeting them because of Hezbollah and the number of issues that it's finding in regards to that. But the war is spreading in that particular region and a number of deaths have been recorded. What happens in relation to that particular area?
Hezbollah is part of the coalition that Iran had constructed in the whole Middle East since years now, with the Houthi, of course. This is also one of the cards that is not used yet to close maybe the Red Sea passage that takes 12% of the all energy that goes to the world. So I believe that what's happening in Lebanon might affect a lot the strength and the capacity of the Hezbollah to continue being a strong ally or a strong threat on the northern side of Israel. They will be affected, I think, especially that Israel will not miss this chance of somehow having a buffer zone in the southern of Lebanon and pushing a little bit more and more Hezbollah to go more into the Bekaa, for example.
I see. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Mrs. Jadid, in regards to this. I'm sure it's something we are paying very close attention to just because of its regional impact within this area and the wider globe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's the news for this hour. Thank you for staying tuned to A News. Make sure you stay with us for further updates, and thank you for watching. Take care.